thank you for having us, and thank you, Loranne, especially. It's exciting to be here to discuss this book, Marta Marta. So Noah and I have sat and discussed this book for a little while, quite a long while, and we thought we'd share just a couple of our thoughts and I guess interpretations of the book, just to give a bit of a flavour and to set the tone for Loranne's chat later.
Dak-Ktieb huwa ktieb li fih ħafna ilħna u ħafna xtomod, u naħseb u għana fuq vera affarijiet żgħar għan nitkellmu wkoll għax vera tant fih ħafna għax naħseb nistgħu nagħtu overview tal-istorja kollha, ma tant hemm affarijiet żgħar li huma importantissimi wkoll nindirizzaw, naħseb li hija wertet nitkellmu fuqhom ukoll.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's exactly it. So we're going to start, I think, by having a bit of a chat about the idea of genre in this book. So most of you, or many of you here, will have read Loranne's work before. This feels like a bit of a departure for Loranne in a very positive way. It's a very exciting book in that sense. And one of the things we both Noah and I agreed was that this book feels like it also subverts genre in a big way. So in the first instance, I guess we feel as though using the term novel is already quite a difficult one to place everything that this novel is about into. In the first place, there's no sort of clearly linear story, but we'll talk about that in a bit more detail. And it also draws on so many other genres in a very playful way. So I guess one of the things, or one of the genres it calls into sort of relief for me is the Gothic novel in many ways. So although it doesn't draw directly, it has a flavour of the Gothic novel. By that I mean the way it sort of creates different scenarios and different characters, and sort of subverts the content in that way. Don't know if you wanted to mention.
Għalija l-idea li dak-Ktieb mhux sempliċiment ma tistax tikklassifika ġast bħala r-rumanz għax ħafna modi jissottoverti l-idea tar-rumanz għax l-ewwel qed tnejsu f'terna li meta tibdih u sakemm tidħol fil-tip tal-lingwaġġ li Loranne tuża huwa dens ħafna u faċli biex kważi titħawwad u b'mod mhux b'mod għax ikkrea d-dinja u anke b'mod ta' kif tuża l-lingwaġġ partikolarissimu li imur oltre minn tipi ta' klassifikazzjoni li nistgħu nitkellmu fuqhom, imma minħabba fekk dak huwa l-poter li għandu wkoll li l-lingwaġġ li juża direttament qed jisfida l-kategoriji li għandna ta' rumanz, speċjalment meta tieħu ir-rumanz huwa ħafna drabi assoċjat huwa s-simbolu tal-enlightenment, tal-letteratura tal-irġiel bojat, huwa dik il-ħaġa li għandha struttura, għandha bidu nofsu tmiem, u għavolja dal-ktieb għandu struttura, għandu bidu nofsu tmiem, imma jisu jolqot ir-rumanz minn hawn, minn naħa l-oħra. U imur kontra l-idea li bil-forsi irid ikun hemm sens lineari f'rumanz, imur kontra li bil-forsi irid ikun hemm xi ħaġa li tista' żżomm magħha plott mill-bidu sal-aħħar. U mhux għax hu l-ewwel rumanz li jagħmel din il-ħaġa, imma l-fatt li l-lingwaġġ tiegħu stess ikompli jaqgħad ma' kollox. U għalija jidħol ħafna fil-tradizzjoni femminista tal-kitba li tmur kontra l-istrutturi stabiliti tal-kitba kif huma tar-rumanz, ta' essay, etc.
Yeah, so one thing that this novel, for those of you who haven't read it, so we'll call it a novel for conversation, is there are various voices. So there's a multiplicity of voices, a multiplicity of narratives in these voices, a multiplicity of references drawn from feminist theory, drawn from lots of cultural sources. So as Noah said, it's a very rich work. And what this creates, and this will move us probably very nicely onto our next point, is a space, and we'd like to sort of focus on a little bit on this idea of space. So the work takes place in a house, and there are essentially different women living in the house and different characters living in the house. So they occupy this, as we've probably explained already, this slightly undefined space, which I think creates a lot of exciting opportunities there for discussion, which is something that...
In laqatni ħafna is-sens hemm l-ispazju tad-dar u il-villaġġ li hemm madwarha li mhuwiex post speċifiku f'Malta u dan il-fatt joħroġ aktar għaliex hemm partijiet li huma ambjentati Brussell u barra minn Malta u f'dawk il-partijiet is-sens ta' spazju huwa vera ċar. Loranne tiddeskrivi t-toroq letteralment tista' tara timmaġina t-toroq eżatt fejn huma. Meta tiġi għad-deskrizzjoni ta' d-dar li l-azzjoni ċentrali tal-rumanz hija marbuta madwar u li qiegħda Malta x'imkien, hemm kważi da sens mistiku, maġiku u jisek ma tafx eżatt fejn qiegħda d-dar u kulħadd Kat kellha idea ta' fejn kienet id-dar, jien kelli idea oħra ta' fejn se kienet. U issu ma tistax tgħid eżatt fejn qiegħda, u fl-istess ħin da sens iżid mas-sens ta' konfużjoni li tesperjenza fil-bidu, tgħid imma fejn qiegħda d-dar, x'qed jiġri, għalaw daw il-figuri u daw l-immaġni, u ma bagħad aktar ma tidħol fih aktar ma tibda tiskopri li dak eżatt huwa l-punt il-fatt li l-ambjent tiegħu hemm kaxxa ġo kaxxa kif qed l-ewwel tipo li u mbagħad indun li fl-aħħar mill-aħħar ir-rumanz innifsu huwa spazju.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. So there's this kind of Russian doll effect in the novel where you have the wider space of the book, then there's the house, then there's individual rooms, and then there's very importantly the kind of mental space of each of the characters who are also contemplating some quite complex ideas. So it creates this really nice idea of space. I think the house is a really important one to focus on. The house is pretty much a protagonist, or another protagonist in the book. I think we wanted to touch on the magic, maybe.
Sense ta' speċjalment qed tiġi għall-elementi li jiġru madwar din id-dar, hemm sens ta' realiżmu maġiku jew ta' maġija, fantażija li għalija vera torbot mal-idea tal-ġenru li konna qed insemmu l-ewwel għax kif għamlet Loranne kif kitbet kreat din id-dinja u ma tikx iċ-ċavetta għalija, ma tgħidlekx tipo li qas fid-dinja stess li inventati m'hemm regoli għalihom. Ġast huwa mod kompletament differenti fejn tista' tqiegħed fil-ħsieb tiegħek li jħalli lilha tesperimenta u tilab u ġebbet il-lingwa b'modi differenti. U għalija vera bħalma kont qed ngħid l-ewwel fuq l-istruttura tar-rumanz li vera iħallija tbiddel u tagħmel jew tesperimenta kif tista' tikteb rumanz. Dawn l-elementi li mhux ma jissolvux, tipo li bil-forsi tkollok xi ħaġa li tissolva, dinja li tagħmel sens, u Loranne tgħidlek mhux bil-forsi qed tirrikonoxxi li mhux bil-forsi rridu nkunu nafu kollox fuq id-dinja li ngħixu fiha lanqas. Anke jekk qed nofru xi ħaġa, qed nofru ktieb analiżi, qed nippruvaw nifhmu, mhux bil-forsi nżiru nafu kollox u qed tirrikonoxxi dik il-ħaġa billi tikkrea xi ħaġa li mhijiex hija eżoterika, ma m'għandix boundaries ċari. Naħseb dik ukoll vera tidħol meta jidħol għall-element tal-reliġjon imbagħad fid-dar u reliġjon.
So religion is a very important aspect of the book. I think as you can see, and you'll see in a little while in the video that we'll show in a minute, religion and religious iconography are kind of everywhere in the book. The characters are all in some way influenced by or overshadowed by Roman Catholicism specifically, more than religion, quite broadly. And what we really enjoyed about this aspect really is the way, again, it's a subversive use of religion. It's introduced in a way, not in a way that, I think this is something we both really loved about this book. You'll hear that a lot from us, and later on in the evening there's a lot of feminist texts that come into the book. There's lots of external references, but all of it feels very almost incidental in ways. So it's never self-conscious. It's actually quite fun, and I think it's really important we talk about this aspect as well. It's a funny book, so it talks about, although it plays with a lot of complex subjects, I think the humour ultimately is there, and something that we spoke about was also campness. It's quite camp, and there's a campness, the inherent campness of Roman Catholicism, and particularly the imagery. So, yes.
U hemm elementi fih li, speċjalment il-bidu ta' kemm tidħol fl-istil din is-serjetà, speċjalment okay. U aktar ma tidħol fih aktar jisu mbagħad tibda tilab ma' daw l-elementi, speċjalment il-karattri jikkrew daw l-ispettakli. Imma anke oltre minn dawk l-ispettakli kif Loranne tikteb fuq il-ħajja ta' kuljum u anke fuq is-sess, hemm dejjem elementi ta' hemm ċerti elementi tgħid tirnexxiela ssib il-kliem perfetti li huma li tinduna kemm huma redikoli daw il-kostruzzjonijiet li għandna f'moħħna li trabbejna madwarhom. U mingħajr ma taqa' għar-redikolaġni per se tħallina nsibu l-umorizmu li hemm. U anke il-fatt li l-umorizmu vera deadpan, u sakemm jekk ma tkunx taf li qiegħed hemm tgħid okay. U vera u hekk moħħbi, vera mistoħbi f'ħafna layers ta' għax it-ton kif inhu miktub huwa pjuttost huwa merqum ħafna. Imma minħabba f'dan il-fatt, imbagħad l-umorizmu u l-fatt li fl-aħħar mill-aħħar mhux qed tieħu lilha nnifisha bis-serjetà kważi mhux jintilef, imma aktar u aktar ikollu poter. Naħseb di.
And I think to kind of take Noah's point to another level, so language is also really important in this book. It's beautifully written. Loranne's Maltese writing is just sort of unmatched, and it's very complex as well. There's a lot of complex descriptions. Complex might be a bit of a big word. I mean detailed in a beautiful way, in a positive way. Things like there's a lot in the earlier part of the book to do with fabric, sewing, a very sort of, and this is only part of it. There's just so much of this. It's so rich. And I think this made us think a little bit about the book's potential next life or lives, and how this book might be translated. Having worked on Loranne's work into an English translation last year, this is a slightly different, completely different proposition entirely. The tone is there, so it's this very intimate tone. It's a very intimate space that I feel that Loranne creates, but this book presents a myriad of challenges to a translator. In the first instance, you've got multiple voices, so you sit with one protagonist, one voice, and then it switches to the next one and the next one. There's first person, third person. Then there's the challenge of translating complex subjects, complex theories as well, possibly already transposed from another language into Maltese. And I think this is a really important point, is something that's very exciting about this book is it presents ideas so eloquently in the Maltese language in ways that I don't think have been encountered before, and that's, I think, a really exciting point, which is part of what makes it a challenge, I think, for translation, is that there's an element there that of how a Maltese reader might respond to the book, which would be very different to, let's say, an Anglophone reader or a Francophone reader. So that's some points. I don't know if you wanted to pick up on that.
Il-stess ħassejtni meta kont qed naqra l-ktieb. Minħabba l-fatt li kont qed naqra dawn tip ta' ħsibijiet bil-Malti u b'dat ċertu mod isu l-ħsieb wara l-istil u r-ritmu tal-ktieb kważi ħassejtni qed naqra ktieb bil-Franċiż. Mux bil-Malti. Ġast is-sens li qed taqra xi ħaġa jisa ġejja minn kultura oħra. Imma li vera għamlet sens, li vera naqdet. Għalhekk diġà tantu fludu bil-lingwa nifisha u tantu fludu bil-tradizzjonijiet li jsemmi u li jorbok madwarhom, li vera speċjalment biex titraduċih li diġà jlab ħafna lingwi, il-Malti, l-Ingliż, il-Taljan, il-Latin, il-Franċiż. Tkun ħafna aktar diffiċli, speċjalment meta tiġu għal dawk il-partijiet fejn jissemma r-reliġjon, jissemma l-isma. Loranne tuża għandha lingwaġġ vera partikolari biex titkellem fuq il-ġisem u hemm xejn partikolari li vera laqtitni li hija sempliċement deskrizzjoni ta' karattru fis-sodda, ma tixtiex tqum mis-sodda. U il-sensitività li tuża biex turi l-preżenza tal-ġisem ta' dal-karattru fis-sodda u l-irdoss u l-ken tal-familja huwa bellezza, huwa passaġġ bellezza u huwa il-ħila ta' Loranne li tieħu mument daqshekk sempliċi u toħroġ ħaġa daqshekk importanti u elementari fil-ħajja umana minnu. U naħseb li tkellimna wkoll fuq meta tiġi biex titraduċi ktieb bħal dan, waħda mill-isfidi tkun li minħabba l-fatt li huwa daqshekk fih daqshekk layers u saffi ta' mhux ironija sax, mhux ktieb ironiku, imma fih ħafna sentenzi li tista'ħodhom bħala Loranne tligges l-emmulaw. U dawk faċli jintilfu jekk sempliċement titraduċi mingħajr il-kuntest ta' warahom, speċjalment meta jiġi għal did-dar speċi eżoterika misterjuża u daw ir-ritwali li n-nies li jgħixu ġod id-dar jagħmlu. Faċli, speċjalment fil-kuntest ta' Malta li ħafna drabi tiġi eżotiċizzata bħala ġawra fil-Mediterran, jekk tiġi biex titraduċi dil-ħaġa faċli titlef is-sens ta' ironija li hemm fil-deskrizzjoni ta' raħal tradizzjonali li huwa sottovertit, imma xorta id-deskrizzjoni ta' raħal tradizzjonali li faċli tispiċċa jekk ma jkunx tradott sew, faċli tispiċċa eżotiċizzata, naħseb.
Yeah, exactly. And just to add to Noah's point, I think there's this one of the, just to give an example of one of the challenges perhaps, or exciting challenges that a translator would encounter would be, as we said earlier, the house is a key, it's the main protagonist essentially, I call it in the novel. Dar is obviously a feminine word in Maltese. That's quite significant in the general world of this book, that the house itself is also female. The house that harbours this sort of community is also female. That's a very difficult one to take across to English, just as one example. Can be done in various other ways, but yeah, that's just one thing to think about. And yeah, I think, what's the other thing I was going to talk about? Was about, names. Do you want to say something about the names? Yeah.
L-ismijiet huma vera importanti. U anke biex titraduċihom. I mean, kull taqsim għandha l-isem tal-karattru li jirrakkunta, ma anke biex tiġi biex titraduċi kemm is-sens ta' umorizmu li hemm li hemm fihom dawn l-ismijiet u kemm il-sinifikat tagħhom għall-kultura Maltija hija diffiċli li toħodhom mill-kuntest tal-ktieb u l-kuntest li qegħdin fih għall-kuntest ieħor, imma ħsieb li għadu kif ġejni frasi issa waqt li qed nitkellmu, speċjalment kien hemm partijiet li vera frustrawni għax il-karattri kollha jesponu ħsibijiet femministi b'mod differenti u li jiġu minn spunti differenti tal-istorja tal-femminizmu li juru d-differenza u l-sbuħija li hemm fid-differenza ta' ħsibijiet differenti feministi. Imma kien hemm partijiet li vera frustrawni għax kien hemm karattri li qed jesprimu ħsibijiet u anke kien hemm parti li qed jaħsibu esprimiet li għalija nsibhom problematiċi ħafna u Loranne fl-aħħar tagħti tip ta' konklużjoni ma tgħidx mhix didattika lanqas, tħalli l-ispazju għad-dialogu, tħalli l-ispazju biex dil-vuċi nismawha, imma hemm vuċi oħra li tmur kontrija wkoll fl-istess ħin. U hemm dawn l-ilħna m'għandhomx għalfejn jsibu konklużjoni. U dik kien naħseb iż-sbuħija tar-rumanz li m'hemmx għalfejn issib konklużjoni stretta liha. U naħseb li kont qed tgħid l-ewwel ukoll fuq it-tradizzjoni, fuq il-kliem. Li bħala romanz fi ħafna elementi u fuq ir-reliġjon, fi ħafna elementi li jistgħu jittieħdu bħala mhux xokkanti, imma li għalija ħassejt li Loranne ħassitha vera libera biex tesprimi u tilab b'daw il-kostruzzjonijiet li trabbejna madwarhom. U dik is-sens ta' liberazzjoni li m'għandekx għalfejn tħossok kostret u tħossok li ħadd offendi lil xi ħadd li qed tgħidha kemm hekk qed titkellem fuq ir-reliġjon jew il-ġeneru, naħseb hija xi ħaġa li hija speċjali f'dan il-ktieb.
I think we have one more point which would be interesting just to bring up, and we'll probably conclude there, which was to Noah's point. There's a lot that you encounter in this book that feels like, as I mentioned earlier, it feels new to encounter in the Maltese language specifically, I think. But that's something I think that we were discussing as a...
il-romanz u li ju, u li naħseb li meta niġu biex inqeduh speċi fl-istorja tal-romanz jew tal-letteratura Maltija jew anke tal-femminizmu Malti, dejjem Malta dejjem inħossin li dejjem għandna dil-mentalità daqsxejn influenzata mill-kolonjaliżmu li kull ħaġa li trid issir tkun l-ewwel darba li f'Malta kien hemm romanz li jagħmel hekk, l-ewwel darba li f'Malta kien hemm xi ħadd li qal hekk, l-ewwel dan huwa l-ewwel romanz hekk, dan huwa l-ewwel darba li qrajt dif romanz u m'għandniex għalfejn li jisu Malta dejjem qegħdin għax dan huwa l-ewwel darba li għax hija jur li l-Malti jista' jilħaq mal-lingwi oħra aktar avvanzati minnha li mhux il-każ, dan huwa ġust ir-romanz li hu, m'hemmx għalfejn li kull xogħol ġdid ikun innovattiv u li jibdel u rivoluzzjonarju radikali, imma huwa xi ħaġa li huwa qed joffri spunt importanti biex xogħlijiet oħra jieħdu minnu u Kat użat espressjoni vera li vera ġbitni jekk tittilha. Nispeċi dan huwa parti mill-canon ta' Loranne aktar milli huwa parti mill-canon tal-letteratura Maltija tal-femminizmu Malti, imma l-ewwel qabel kollox huwa il-canon ta' Loranne. I
think so. So I think we'll end on this note. I hope that gave you all a bit of an introduction to a lot of the complexities. It is a really brilliant novel. I do recommend that you buy it, decide for yourselves if we could call it a novel or what you would prefer to call it. And now we are going to move on to the next part of the evening, which is there's a film that's been made as a sort of companion piece to the by Joe, sorry, I missed that part. It's been created by Joe as a companion piece to the novel. It kind of moves through the narrative arc or not narrative arc of the novel. So from the different narratives, from the first to the second through to the final. So I invite you to watch it, and then we'll have Loranne. So thank you. Kat Storace.